it's not just about the food, or it's not just about the drinks.
Yeah.
It's the whole experience.
Because we're 2024 now. People want good food, but they want a great service, they want a great experience, they want everything, they want the whole package. Any entrepreneur at the beginning will actually fail or will do some mistake. I did tons of mistakes. When we opened Clarence, I did so many mistakes. But it's no mistake, it's called a learning curve. Be gutsy, be driven, and don't be afraid to fail.
Welcome to Abnormal, the podcast for normal people who want to do abnormal things. Today's guest is world-renowned chef Olivier Elzer. Olivier is a multiple restaurant owner, culinary director to global hotel chains, and has 27 Michelin stars to his name in France and Hong Kong. Olivier, welcome to Abnormal.
Hello, welcome.
Have I got that right? 27?
Yeah, quite.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Phew, good
yes,
start.
Thank God.
Okay, it's great to meet a chef like you. I've always wanted to ask a legitimate chef this question.
Yeah, thank you. Go for it.
Do you ever
Yeah.
eat junk food?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have to say that, any food, and junk food included, can be satisfying, for a craving. I think there's no blame, or you should not feel bad about it. After, I think the question is for our kids or our youngest, giving that too often. I'm not too keen for that. But I mean, once in a while, having like a craving for like a good burger or others, I'm all in,
And yet maybe your classification of junk food might be different.
Quite, as well, yes. Well, I think, look, I eat chips, I eat a lot of junks too, but I think it's all about balancing it right. That when you eat junk food, you have to do some extra cardio, or you have to do some extra sport to compensate, So I think for me, I'm all good with that. For me, it's all about, the craving is your heart. For example, there are some people doing junk food and they do it very well, Yes, the name is not really flattering, but at the end of the day, if it tastes good, that's all what matters, I think.
Does that go through your head when you're tasting menus? If you're balancing a menu and you're having maybe tasting desserts, do you think, okay, I probably should hold back here, or is it just part of the job?
No, I think as a Michelin Star chef, I would say my first life was to be a Michelin Star chef, and I'm very happy to do it for 27 years now. And I think for me, there's clearly a conduct and also a learning expertise that you get along the way. Very early stage when I started to be a chef, my father-in-law told me, look, there's layers in every single work that you do. So there's layers. You can be cooking a pizza in a truck, as you can be a two Michelin Star chef. So pick the one you want to be. And I think that was a very, very, very important notion I get very early. So luckily, I chose, I will say, or at least my choice was to choose the best restaurant in France, to go with the toughest chef to learn. And I think now I'm free to do whatever I want. And I think actually going more to basically strike against junk food that you talk about it, because when you've been on the top, to all those Michelin Stars restaurants, and when you're getting a bit wiser and with more experience, actually I want to organize. I would love to create a fast food which can be on the more healthy side for our kids, because I think having a craving sometimes for something naughty is fine, but if you make it healthy, it's even better.
That's such a cool concept.
Yeah, not easy to do.
You've really answered my question. Then what's next? What's the dream? So
next is big. For me, being a chef, it's an amazing journey as a man and also as a chef, as an entrepreneur. And I think for me, I really like this job because I always say often that I'm born as a chef and I will die as a chef. And I think even though along the way, from being a Michelin Star chef who need or wants to have a lot of recognition, I will say that I'm done with the ego chasing. I had, like you said, 27 stars. I was very happy to work with the best chef in the world, like Joël Robuchon and many others. But to some point, I don't have to prove anything in the way that how many stars I need more to show to myself that I'm being on the top. What I'm more interested now since 2 years is to switch into an entrepreneur way, which for me is like, okay, with the knowledge of your 25, 27 years and being cooking at the top here, how do you bring that to something more interesting, more valuable? And I think if I want to be remembered for once, is at least trying to bring French food in a way more casual way, way more humble way, way more approachable way, price-wise as well, is something I'm focusing on. So that's what's next.
That's great.
Yes.
The people of Hong Kong will be very happy to hear that.
Exactly, yes.
You mentioned your Michelin stars there, and you're sort of born as a chef.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like every chef's dream is to achieve that milestone of getting a Michelin star?
I think it's clearly a very important goal. I will say for a lot of chefs in France, it become more international for the last 10 years because Michelin back in the day was more mainly in Europe. So I will say we start with France, and then they extended to Switzerland and the other country. Now you can see that Michelin is almost everywhere in the world. So I think it become a global interest for everyone. But I think at the end of the day, for a French chef, it was for me, it was very important back in the day. But then, of course, when you evolve step by step, I think it's a mindset to have originally first, Michelin is very important. Whatever star I get is very important. But at the end of the day, it's just like when you're an athlete, when you need to perform sometimes, when you're under pressure on the daily basis because you have the numbers running and you need to be there. First is the same in terms of quality. What's the setup you're offering? How do you prepare your days? How do you source your product? Which type of chefs you need with you? So a lot of people are asking me how the pressure is with Michelin stars. Actually, for me, the pressure is I don't really feel it because when you put yourself to a certain type of work and pressure yourself, at the end of the day, you're just rolling. And then when Michelin comes or not, because you never know, you just do what you do and you get what you get. And I think that's for me. Sometimes I like to for the kids who are coming now in this industry. Michelin is important, yes, but I also like to backyard a bit in saying like, look, first try to to be in phase of what you want to do, and also build yourself step by step with what you want, and I think that's what is important.
And so, how long were you when you started on this journey? How long was that stage for you to write? I'm in a kitchen now, I'm learning, between okay, now a Michelin star is realistic?
Yeah, I think for me, it's that when I start at 14 being a young chef trainee. First of all, the background was my father was a popular chemist in Germany, so I think chemistry kitchen has something close to each other. He used to cook very well. So I remember being a kid and smelling his broth,
We hear about these food labs.
Yeah,
now,
exactly. Yeah, and I think I was smelling his food and I was enjoying his food. I think my whole family background, my mother, my grandfather, my grandfather cooked for the Tsar of Russia. So we have a very strong hospitality background in the family. So it was almost given for me. I grew up on the countryside of France where we were surrounded by farms, cows, nature, mother nature, and I think for me a chef is close to mother nature, and I think it was just logic for me that when the sous chef in the restaurant of my mother called sick, and I saw my mom screaming with the chef because he was angry, we're full house, how am I gonna make it by myself? This guy is useless, blah blah blah. I step in basically and say, okay, I'm gonna help you. So I did the starters, I did the pot wash that night. And honestly, that day it was very tough. I was in the shit running all over the place, because when you're young, you don't know yet. Because my mom was always saying, "Oh, you're handsome, so you do cleaning the glasses at the bar, But there's something I didn't like back in the day, being in contact with the customer.
You didn't like it?
Well, the thing is I was too straightforward and wild, so I will be capable of saying to you, I don't like you in your face, and that's not what you do, right? So that's why I kind of has always this grumpy temper.
Grumpy teenager.
Yeah, exactly, grumpy teenager where I was like, okay, whatever he tells me, I'm going to tell him the truth, So I feel like when I was in the kitchen, this first service, when I see the chef being angry, and then switch it to like feeling to trust me because I was helping him and being like, being a team, I really like it. And even though it was a small restaurant, but I love it. And I knew it was for me, And I think after when you put all the dots together, I used to love food. France, you're surrounded with so many ingredients and so many culture about eating. And I think for me, it was just normal. And it was a very normal, it was a very natural process. So I'm very blessed with that because, a lot of kids now, they don't know exactly what they want to do. And I think for me, I have to say I was very lucky for that.
So from 14 years old onwards,
Correct.
You knew exactly what you wanted to do for the rest
so
of your life.
As I told you, my father-in-law told me, look, you want to be a chef. His two kids was doing very well at school. They were studying the best business school. But he could have put me down and he actually looked at me and said, look, I respect you as much as my sons, but you need to know which type of chef you want to be. So very early stage, I understand that I want to work for Michelin Star's chef. And of course, because I have this army like sporty, crazy competition mindset, I decided to go for the craziest one. So I was like the one screaming, throwing plates, and like just getting nuts. That was in the 2000, in the early 2000, even 98 when I started. And I love it. For me, the chaos was like I was welcoming the chaos because like, wow, that's the fun.
It's real. It's
Yes,
real.
it's
all
real.
the TV shows are
Exactly.
real. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems a world since now. I mean, you have maybe see Gordon Ramsay like overplaying that, but I think he did it well. But it was really like this. Honestly, in the 80s, 90s, like chef had like the ultimate power. There was tyrants, there was screaming, there was like horrible things happening, but it's just all for one reason, is to keeping the people under pressure to get the best of them in the moments, and of course for the customer who paying. But I always love it, honestly.
What's one of the craziest things you've seen in the kitchen in those early days?
Yeah. Well, for me, for example, there will be a chef, a 2 Michelin Star chef, who will have a caramel pan in his hand, and he was pissed, so he threw the pan from the pass to the end of the kitchen. So you can see the pan spilling with the caramel leaking all over the place. I can tell you, caramel at 180 degree plus, getting on your skin, you really nuts.
So boiling hot caramel flying around the kitchen.
Yeah, flying around the kitchen and finishing at the end, exploding on the wall. I see like some crazy shit, like like really crazy. But I think, look, what I like as well, for me, out of all I learned, just cooking skills-wise, it learns me and teach me how to be a man as well. And this for me is a journey where I really love that because, it was tough. You will speak about this now. You will say, oh, this is crazy. That's not good. How can you do that? But this is how it was, And I think, look, I don't seem unstable. I think I'm doing quite well. And I think, there was some crazy hard time. But at the end of the day, that's what it is when you want to be on the top, and that's why I built it up so early. But for me, it was part of the journey. And sometimes you need to learn what's not good to apply to do something good, right? And that's why I think all those times was for me great memories and crazy memories, and I love it.
I'm sure you've got a whole book's worth of stories that you could share.
Yeah, I think my dream will be one day to maybe do a book when I will be a bit older. I'm still too young, but one day I will be one.
I think it's a valuable lesson that you shared to know what you don't want to do as well as what you do want to do. So now in the position that you're in, you have your own way of running a kitchen or running a business now.
Yes.
But I'm sure at the time, every experience is kind of takes you back. And my question, so you're obviously a young guy, you knew what you wanted from an early age. So when you're around those chefs and those people that you look up to, and sometimes they're crazy, but you can learn a lot from them.
Yeah.
Is everyone in the kitchen also aspiring to be their own chef?
I think there's a big ecosystem of a lot of different type of people with different profiles. I think for me, one very important notion that I hope my kids will have and my son, it's to be driven. And I think for me, how the crowd will be separating inside the same kitchen, that you will see those one just come for work to get a paycheck, and then you see the one who have like long teeth, which really wants to come here to be driven, to learn, to soaking like a sponge, because it's exactly what it is. When you're a young chef, you just have to close your mouth, put your eyes down, and start to soak like a sponge, And you need a couple of years to really be be good at it. It's not, I love the fact that now we have a lot of TV shows, and I think it's a great marketing PR way for food. But what I don't like of it is that a lot of kids now, after 1, 2, 3, 5 years, they believe that they can become a Michelin Star chef and they can run a business. But I think that's gonna be a tough road for them because I'm for 27 years in this industry. I still have so much to learn, and I tell you, it's an ongoing process that you have to really you have to accept it, and you have to also accept kind of understanding of lifting your friends at work and your different the different cook style that you have. But I think for me, I always say God is fair, and French, we are very good at cooking, for example, because we learned that and it's our DNA, right? But we are very bad to running business because, we don't have the financial mindset about it. I'm half German, half French. I'm born in Germany. So I guess my my German side brings me back to something a bit more realistic. But I think one thing I want to say is that one very important notion you need to understand about cooking and being a chef is that you need to know early what you want to do. Because, for example, I see some guys working for 15, 20 years in like crazy hours and days, and then they give up. And for me, to going back to your question, it's very painful to see some guys who works for 5, 10, 15 years in crazy kitchen while screaming and they did their best, and then they just give up because they become too tough. The reason why they give up is because at the first place, they didn't have a goal, They didn't have a real goal, which for me, I knew at the beginning what I want to do. Yes, I'm still evolving in my goal, and my goal changed along the way, but I had a goal, and that's for me very important. Because a lot of my chefs back in the day, I used to tell them, why do you work for 15 years and just give up or go now to working to a very casual place? It's such a waste. You have quite a lot of knowledge. You get a lot of knowledge that you get the last 15 years, and you're just going to go doing pizza now. I respect, I love pizza, but the thing is, you don't need 15 years or 2 or 3 Michelin stars to make pizza after, right? And I think that's one thing that the kids or anyone who start kitchen or cooking has to understand. Make sure that you have a goal, and then you need to go step by step along the way, and I think that's very important.
So your goal was to ultimately be a Michelin star chef.
So that was my first goal. I think my first goal was, I 2 years ago I reborn as a new person, and so to go to this journey very quickly and explain you, was like I was getting all those Michelin stars and all those accolades, and I'm a guy who is tough with myself, and I always thought that, I live better with criticize. I prefer that you criticize me, that you always give me praise, you're amazing. So when you're a Michelin star chef for a couple of years already, you kind of taking all those praise from those people. And for me, I was feeling a bit bored for 4 or 5 years already, where yes, cooking the best dishes, getting the best Michelin awards or whatever, it's very, it was nice, but I feel in the back of my head something was, ringing off saying, I have a deja vu feeling, and I want to learn more. I want to evolve more. And 2 years ago, I read a book, which is the 21 Law of Great Leadership for John C. Maxwell. And it really strikes me, it really switched my mind. And I think I was ready to read that book. And it just makes me realize that I have so much more to learn in another aspect of it. French chef, we are amazing cook, but we are horrible. We have a horrible leadership. We don't know. We are tyrants. We are managing people under pressure. We're managing people under chaos, just like I saw. And somehow I didn't want to become that. And that's why I realized that why I say I reborn 2 years ago is because it was almost like, it's not that I die as a chef, because I'm still a chef and I'm still the designer of all my menus and all I do. But for me, someone new arrived where it's almost like I'm a baby entrepreneur now, who actually, with the knowledge of my 26 years as being a chef, is switching to be a young entrepreneur who's learning how to do business, how to build, good P&Ls and good concepts with my French knowledge. And this is my new mission now. And for me, I love it because, it's just so much to learn. And that's something I really like to do now.
What was the one thing from the book that you took that made that change?
Well, for example, take Joël Robuchon. Joël Robuchon was my mentor. He's a great chef. He's one of the most Michelin star chef ever. And then you realize, when you apply what I read in the book to him, for example, I don't think he will be that good leader. He can, as a leader, just himself, because he had a strong temper. He was very, he was very hot tempered. He had a lot of, he had a lot of pressure. He putting a lot of pressure on his team, which I understand. But going back to me, I think he did it at his time, and this was okay because it's normal. But for me, I don't want to copy paste what he is as my mentor. So I will almost say that my first mentor was Joël Robuchon, and this is my chef mentor, and my accomplishment are done on that side. But now I have different mentors which are more wider in terms of capability. And for me, I think, one thing I believe in Asia, because I'm here for 16 years, is that French food is well appreciated. But I think French food is also, I would say, sometimes too complicated, not accessible, and also not affordable. And I think, for example, when you go to Hong Kong, you have so many beautiful kitchens from all over the place. And I think French will always be the one which it's most of the time the most expensive. But actually, if you really dig to France, you realize that we have actually the same affordable cooking in France as well. It's just that it doesn't make it the way so far. And we're only showcasing the beauty of being the chef, the best chef in the world, etc. But the best chef for me is subjective of each opinion, you know. And that's why for me, I'm more interested to cover way more people with fun concept about French food than just focusing on piling Michelin stars. Which, of course, I'm very happy and proud to have 2 Michelin stars at L'Envol, but it's one of my goals, and I have others now.
It's a great point, and one that I've learned in the last sort of 5 years. My wife is French, and so we go to France quite often across the summers, and you know, once or twice a year we try and go. And I'm a huge fan of French food. I absolutely love French cuisine. I grew up going to France very regularly. My mum loves France, but it's true that we really only eat it when we're in France, unless it's a real treat when we come back.
Quite.
Apart from recently when we went to Clarence, your restaurant.
Thank you.
And you know, that was just like such a beautiful experience because it was also a fusion. Am I right? It's not just strict French food. One of the dishes, you're probably going to hate me for saying this, but reminded me of beef Wellington, the English dish, but it had foie gras on top. It's really nice to see you on this mission to spread French cuisine to make it more accessible to people, because a lot of my friends are like rugby guys and not tapped into French cuisine, and you try and tell them how good French food is and convince them to try and eat some of this stuff, but it's often not very accessible in Hong Kong at the moment.
No, you know, for me, you know, I have a restaurant in China, in Hangzhou, for example, and you know, when you go to the markets, it's actually very similar to France. You know, you have a market, you have people going there. You know, the ingredients change a bit, of course. You know, everything changed, but it's pretty much the same as well. And then you just like going, like trying so many yummy, tasty street food. You know, and you're just like, why can we do that? You know, and we do it actually. But the point is, like, France has you know, we have a huge ego. I would say no issue, but we want always to be seen as one of the most complicated and most sophisticated kitchen in the world. But the downside of that is that you're choosing to put yourself so high that, you know, no one connects with you. And I always say now on the business side, if you put Italian, if there will be an AI who can calculate the P&L of how much Italian food generates in casual way and how French food generates in casual way, I think you can take out some papers and crying, because I think French we're not doing well. And I think for me, it's not only about running money. It's not about that. It's about offering some very tasty food. So fusion I'm not a big fan of the word fusion, even though you can say it and you are free to say that. I think for me is in the model of French restaurant, it's pretty much always elaborated by a bistro, a brasserie, or a fine dining, which I think for me, I'm kind of striking against that. Because yes, those are three models which are very popular, but actually French food is way more than that.
Sorry, just to butt in. So the bistro or the brasserie is the English equivalent of the pub, the local pub food.
Yes,
right?
Quite. Yeah, the bistro especially. Brasserie, I would say, is a bit bigger, but clearly. And I think, you know, I've been working with my teams now where we actually, sometimes, you know, we dig into old recipe from France that no one does anymore, and we bring them back alive and we reinterpreting them. And I really like that, because it's almost like sometimes in a French restaurant, you feel that the mainstream, it's like, you know, a beef tartare, some oyster, you know, some foie gras, and then everyone does that, you know. But I think for me, actually, I'm evolving to creating actually and digging back those old recipe. And I think it will be well received, and we do that in Clarence already. And it's true that Clarence, what give you the feeling of fusion is that it's more that I call this an Asian twist. Because, you know, if you and me will be in New York right now, I will cooking totally different than I cook in Hong Kong. Because, you know, I don't want to lose my soul of cooking, like, for example, Chinese food, because I'm French. I want to cook Western and French. But somehow you need to adapt to the local palate. And this is some things, you know, which is important. For example, Clarence, we just have a new chef, Christophe. So Christophe, I know him for 20 years. He has 1 Michelin stars in France, came to as a chef now in Clarence. And I tell you, Chris needs about 6 months to 1 year to really understand the local palate.
Wow.
Because I tell you, what salt for you and me is different for Hong Kong people, you know. No, they can eat soya sauce by the spoon, which you and me, we can't. But then if we do a sauce which is very reduced from 50 liter to 1 liter, where there's 0 gram of salt, they will tell you, this is very salty. It's actually concentrated, it's not salty. But you can see how crazy the palate has evolved in Asia. 15 years ago when I arrived, an oyster from France would be too salty compared to a Japanese one. Or the cheese will be too smelly, and the people will say, no way I'm eating cheese. But now they can take eggpras and master cheese, which are just normal for them. And I think what is outstanding in Asia for me is the capability of adapting. You know, the older generation has no enzyme for dairy. So, for example, the older generation doesn't take dairy well. Cream, butter, cheese is very difficult for them. But actually, for the younger generation who is way more in contact with the West, it's clearly that you can see also on their shape, You know, for example, before you always have this, analogy of thinking Asian are small and everything. Some of my friend dudes, they are bigger. They're 6'5", they're 6'6". are looking them like, hey, how are you? So, and I think this is coming from the fact that, they're being more in contact of the West and the way they're eating what they eat. And of course, our kitchen is way more accepted.
So you mentioned there about your new chef at Clarence, was it Christophe?
Yeah, Christophe. Schmidt.
And so he's having to learn a palate.
Yes.
And can you talk us through what that process actually looks like? Is it just testing menu items and getting feedback?
No, so, okay, for me, for example, when you're a chef, you never cook for yourself. I love Marco Pierre-White because he's one of my favorite chefs because, he always explained this is that, first of all, you need to respect Mother Nature. And Mother Nature is there's nothing on top of Mother Nature. Mother Nature is what Mother Nature gives you. Then a chef has to be an extension of Mother Nature, which basically you respect the product by season it and by cook it well. But then, of course, I will add that you need to, I will say, adapt without losing your authenticity to the region. For example, for me, I'm at Clarence, we want to make our customer happy. But if I just cook for myself or for my own sake, or I just say I want to cook like in Paris, well, then you don't connect with people. And for me, that's a shame, right? And that's why for me, the Asian twist I call is that a chef like Christophe, for example, he will cook too French for me. And when I say too French is that he people eating smaller portion in Hong Kong, for example, they like to eat more smaller portion of 4, 5, 6 bites than only having a starter, main course, and a dessert, right? So the formula is already different. And that's why I've been working on new concept where, for me, a concept, when you go to a dim sum, you have about 8 to 15 bites that you have on the table, displayed there with a lot of flavors, where 3 to 4, you will feel that they are exceptional. 3 to 4 are very good. 3 to 4 are just okay. And then another 3 is just so-so. But your overall feeling of the dim sum will be outstanding because you will be like, wow, for this price, I have that much. In Europe, we have more like a starter, a main course, a big dish, So when you have, for example, one that you don't enjoy too much, it's already 33% of the bill, which is put in the rubbish. So that's why you're like, how can you be happy? And the perception is totally different. So Chris, for example, has to understand that reduce your portion, try to offer more variety of French food. And then, of course, in terms of, I will say, strength in power, I think that Hong Kong has to be now tuned down to one level, where it used to be 2 or 3. When I talk about level of power, means that when you do a sauce in France, we're using a lot of reduction. So we go from a stock with 250 liter to 1 liter. So this process concentrates the sauce and gives you the flavor. Mm-hmm. But in Asia, it's not what they do. They don't reduce both. So that's why, for example, when you do too many reduced sauce, it's way too strong for them. So I will say that if I have to cook in France or in Hong Kong, as a chef, you need to tune down a little bit. Because ladies going most, if you look at our data, we have a lot of ladies in our restaurant. And if you have too much strength, then unfortunately it becomes not as good as they expect. And then you need to adapt.
I mean, hearing you talk, it's literally like a science, isn't it?
Yeah.
It feels like it's just data-driven, analytical, but I'm sure there's the emotion and the love of it underlying everything. Yeah.
Well, I think, I think data, we're living in the world where data are very important, but I think in the food industry is the same. For example, when you look at the data of a dish, I always like to talk about the data of a dish. When a dish comes half full and the customer tell you he's no more hungry anymore, I mean, I don't buy it. You don't come to the restaurant to spend money and say, hey, I was very good, but they need half of it. Yeah. So this for me is a red flag right away where you say, okay, look, it doesn't matter if the customer doesn't like the dish, but how do you gonna strike to give him something else that he like?
And would you track that?
Yeah, for sure. We
So,
track all the
when
dishes.
you get the dishes back from the kitchen, you mark down.
Well, we have to. You know,
Wow,
that's a basic basic process we do. Of course, theoretically, we do it more in fine dining, but I apply it in all my restaurants because an empty plate is the most important data that you can have, because it tells you exactly of how the dish is perceived. People, they don't want to bother to tell you, like, hey, I didn't like it. Some my wife is very good at that. She loves to, telling the waiters of, hey, I didn't like that.
But she's French. So
yeah, no,
my
one is not French. She's born in Beijing, was up in Canada. She's a nutcracker, like for me, I won't just hide myself under the table, But for example,
I can't do it. I can't bring myself to do it.
No, I mean, look, I can totally say something to a waiter or a chef. I think that's fine. But I think sometimes it's not necessary. But I mean, at the end of the day, people has a lot in their plate already. Sometimes you don't want to argue with the waiters or whatever. So that's why you're just saying, hey, it's okay, it's fine. But for me, it's not fine because, there's nowhere in any restaurant or any business where you take half and you say, hey, I pay for it full. But you know what? I'm going to leave from here and come back. And I think Hong Kong is a very competitive place, There's 60,000 restaurants in Hong Kong for 7.8 million people. So I can tell you better be competitive. Wow. And that's why I love to be here because I think French food is for me even more tougher here than in France because people are not as connected. And that's why I think staying alive is something which is already amazing.
No, it is amazing. You mentioned there about the smaller portions. And one thing I noticed when my wife and I went to your restaurant, Clarence,
yep.
It was like a tasting menu.
Correct.
And it's like you choose two from each
Correct.
section.
Yeah.
But with two of you going, you pretty much end up ordering the whole menu.
Yes, correct.
And so it's great. You end up with, and it's very local style.
Correct.
Like you have sharing plates.
Correct.
I loved it. And normally I'm not a fan of sharing food. If I'm going to a restaurant, I want my meal because I want to know that I'm eating that amount. But that's more from like a performance athlete perspective. I want to know how much protein I'm getting from it.
Exactly.
But this experience was great because it said there was no real menu item left off. We pretty much tried everything.
Yeah. I think, I worked with, a year ago, I worked with Olivier Smith, which was a keto expert, and I think that was a great experience where actually because you talk about that, about your protein intake and everything, I think like that too, and for example, I will be happy in the future to put some real calorie on the dishes. Because, as a French, it could be contradictory, because French, we technically rich. But I think we're living in the world where people want to track their data. They have way more knowledge. And for example, sometimes, you want to go out with your wife without killing your diets, and you still want to know really, I can tell you today, there's no any restaurant who gives you a real accurate, number of real calories.
Such a good idea.
Yes,
such a good idea.
And Etology is a company which I'm friend with, so they do that. But I can tell you the back work that they have to do with the dietitian. They have a special software where they need to analyze everything, and that's why it's not easy to do because you need to input it straight at the organization at the beginning. Yeah. It's quite heavy, but I mean, if you organize it at the beginning, it's totally feasible. But I think, that's also the way I'm going, which is, sometimes you want to go out, but you still want to, you don't want to have a bombshell in terms of calorie, Because, I tell you this, if you go for fine dining, you can have 5 to 10,000 calories in one dinner, no problem, Yeah. And this, for example.
And you don't even feel like it.
Exactly.
You don't feel like
and you don't feel like it. And I think that's the real fact, But when you're a bit to workouts and when you also, thinking about like, hey, I don't want to have to run 15 kilometers to kill that. I think it's a very important notion. And the keto menu was actually a marketing event we did where we did an hour of sports, which is Muay Thai, with the journalists and the media. And then we go eat 1,088 calorie menu with 5 courses. And who was keto. And honestly, I had a very good response. And I think I will be very encouraged to do some concept like this in the future. Because I think it's the way we should go, more healthy and more. Yeah. You can choose. I think you can choose.
I think that's such a brilliant idea, especially in Hong Kong. I find because a lot of people are very conscious on health and fitness here. I've noticed from other markets or other places.
No, and another things we never talk because that's everyone people is scared to talk about as well is about the MSG or for example a lot of chemicals are in those broth, So that's another aspect, that you sometimes don't see but affects you as well. The saltiness, your mouth is very salty. You have a lot of chemicals inside the soup or the product. That's another problem also that we have. that I think it's important to responsible.
It could
source.
almost be like an educational piece as well, because I'm aware of it, of calorie counting, because I used to be a professional athlete, and not that I counted calories when I was a professional athlete, but I've always been aware of nutrition. Only 2 years ago, when I did a fitness competition and I actively lost weight and went on a diet, where I was counting calories on my phone every meal. Only then, after 7 years of pro sport, did I realize, oh my God, I did not know there were this many calories in avocado or olive oil or butter. So now, after that experience, going to restaurants, and again, I don't do it anymore. I try and just be more balanced and eat whole foods and things. Going to restaurants, it could be the smallest dish, but I'm in my head, I'm like, this sauce will be so calorie dense. Like be made just with butter and oils. And so having that in a restaurant, I think would be such a cool concept.
No, I think it will come. It's not my priority right now.
Can't
but
give
I will
anything
do it.
away.
Exactly.
Can't give anything away. No, I love that, especially with the fast food thing. I know there's a lot of meal prep companies in Hong Kong and around the world now, which are doing. I use one Nutrition Kitchen, and I have for years. Absolutely love them because it does all my counting for me.
Yes. I
know 3 meals a day from that. I know that's not enough for me. But then all I have to supplement with that is meals around that.
No, and I think you're an athlete, and I'm not an athlete, but I have the mindset of it. And I think one thing also I want to be clear is that I used to do 2 hours of sport a day, and I have unfortunately less time now. But I just come back from Taipei, and my friend GM, he just lose like 15 kg,
Wow.
And in the last 3 months, And I tell you this, he lose 15 kg with doing zero sport. And and this is also why I talk about this, is because yes, I think doing sport a day, half hour, an hour of exercise is very important. But at the end of the day, it's all about diets, And I think it's how much you take of calorie, how much you eat, how much you burn. It's a very simple equation, It's not. There's no BS of anything. It's like go straight to the point. How much you eat, how much you burn, and if you want to lose weight, that's it. So I'm gonna start my diet actually on January, because I'm on the fixed side. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the most
I'm on the fixed side.
Diet
exactly.
start,
Let's hope I show you my results.
Yes.
But no, but I think it's doing sport. I love it, and I miss it a bit because I need to. Basically, I lost my routine because I kind of have like more restaurant to take care of, so I get out of my routine. But I'm gonna set up a new one. And but I think going back to the calorie intake is very important. But I think what I don't like is that there's a lot of misconduct or misleading about the calorie of what you eat. For example, just on the packet of food, they're using the numbers the way you want. For example, they put you 300 calories, but then the small line is only for 50 grams
per serving.
Exactly, per serving. But what you just realize is you already have 3 servings in your mouth, and you're like, oh shit, And mustard, for example, I love to use mustard because mustard has 0 calorie, and I figured out.
I didn't know that.
Yes, exactly. So I put mustard all over the place, But I think it's a very, interesting topic. But I think we are still not mature in many aspects of it, and I think there's still a lot to do, which is good for me.
Yeah, it's great opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's one thing I think when I go back to the UK, they're probably more ahead of the curve on this because they have to put calories on their menu items.
Yeah.
So you go to a restaurant, they've got the calorie count. They don't have, I don't think they have macros, but they have the calorie count.
Yeah.
But going back to your point, it's crazy. People just looking to get into exercise or starting a health and fitness routine.
Yeah.
And I'm around it all the time. People ask me, oh, what should I be doing for this? What should I be doing for that? And it's like, guys, honestly, you're never going to out-exercise a bad diet.
Yes.
And I know you don't want to hear this. I know you want to go to the gym 2 hours a day and be like, okay, you're going to lose loads of weight.
Yeah.
But if you still eat like that, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
You might gain more muscle, but you're still not going to lose weight.
I think England is ahead because Asia, for me, what my understanding about food is like, for example, Asian wants money for value in terms of food. So, for example, as I can tell you in the fine dining, right? In the fine dining world, when you want to try to do some dishes which are, I will say, more healthy perceived, I tell you go straight to the wall. Because, they will tell you, we like it. It's very nice to have a nice vegetable dish, But then all of a sudden they realize like, okay, I could have caviar, I could have meat, I could have protein. And I think in Asia, they are still very protein, and main products oriented. And the value, they don't see a value in eating a plate of vegetables where they would say like, well, that's a ripoff to get for this price. And that's why we are a bit behind. and also genetics, let's just be fair, like for example, a lot of my Asian friends, they are so fit and actually they can eat quite a lot and they're still like very skinny, And I think for me, it's clear that I think the Western world is more ready to, to kind of count the calorie. Asian coming there for sure. I have a lot of Asian friends who are counting the calorie too. But I think that's maybe also the reason why it comes from, because financially and also, as a business, I have some friends who are running like, I'm sure you must know Treehouse or, Mana before. It looks like healthy. It's healthy, but it's not that easy. It's not that successful. Those guys, they had hard time too. And that's why you realize like when you really want healthy, you need to find the sweet spot inside the restaurant where you cannot only offer only healthy food.
Even myself, obviously, as a Westerner, I'm very guilty of going if I'm paying to restaurants and eating out and not cooking myself. An immediate thought process that goes through my head is like, right, value for money here.
Cut.
If I'm paying this, how much volume am I getting? Because I'm a hungry guy. Yes. I'm going to be hungry. Same apart from special occasions when my wife and I will go out and we'll do the tasting menu or something like that.
Yeah.
But we purposely don't go to many like tasting menu type of restaurants because it's like, okay, well, unless it's a really special occasion. But yeah, I think it's definitely a huge opportunity. And I would say that counting calories can be a dangerous game as well. From the individual perspective, because when I did it, for example, I became obsessed with it. And anyone could ask my wife about this. Like I was literally staring at her eating because she'd be eating like normal, like a normal person. But I was on this crazy training block, losing weight, but also training really hard. And my performance was really high. Like I got the results that I wanted. But I was obsessed with it and it wasn't healthy. But doing that exercise educated me on food. And so I won't count calories again. I can't imagine I'd go back to that, like seriously. But I'm very aware now of different types of foods and what works and what doesn't.
I think, diet is a business with a fruitful financial business for a lot of people. And that's why I think it's a hot topic, And I think I agree with you that, I've been stopping to work out the last 6 months. And I tell you this, so I was counting my calorie. I was working out every single day, tired or not. And I tell you, I enjoyed the last 6 months to just switch off this button for a while. Just to like, okay, you know what? The 2 days ago, I ate a kebab, for example. I love kebab once in a while. I know it's a calorie bomb, 786 calories if you want, for all the checking and knowledge I have. But I tell you, it was very yummy. And I think I agree with you that sometimes when you are a competition or when you have a goal, you can switch on the button. But I think we are living in a world where we have so much information now. I'm the first one spending my whole day on YouTube, checking some podcasts, checking some knowledge, Huberman, all those guys. And then you realize like, okay, what is it not going too far as well in the way that, sometimes, Mother Nature's or just enjoying is as well without thinking too much about it. Because I was to the point sometimes, I will go for dinner and if I will eat too much, I will be pissed with myself, So then you are in a situation that you don't want to be, right? Because you're like, hey, this is a great meal you should enjoy. And what you do, you're kind of angry about it. And I think that's not what you want to achieve.
It's not healthy.
No, it's not healthy.
It's not healthy.
I agree.
And I was in the exact same position, which I hated as well. I was like, because I'm such a foodie, nowhere near as much as you are, but I just love enjoying food.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love dessert as well. I've got such a sweet tooth. My mum's fault, but it was so painful, that whole experience. I loved the discipline that I had to show to get the results. But I was like, God, I miss I also miss having a beer with my friends. Not going out and getting written off, but having a beer.
Yeah, that's true.
Enjoying dinner, not worrying. But it took a while to get out that mindset of, oh God, that's too many calories. Oh my gosh, what am I doing?
I think fasting is a good, honestly, sometimes without going too deep, if you fast, I think is a nice way. For example, for me, all that I get, like having dinner is where normally F&B or chefs, this is where you make the money. Dinner time is where the income is supposed to be the highest. But for example, me, I like to have a big lunch eventually and have a less smaller dinner. And I know Germans eat very early, like 5:30. When I was young, I was making fun of them. I say like, who the heck is eating at 5:30? But I think
now it's you.
Yeah, now it's me. And I think it's a great lesson, right? But I think, it's just because that on the daytime you will be walking more, burning more calories, and at night you will be a bit more...
And digestion, right?
Yeah, and digestion too. I think, for example, there's nothing worse to have a big meal and then you go to sleep. Like you're not going to have a good sleep. So you can see that something's going on in your body, which doesn't make sense, right? And I think all those, those alarms sometimes switch on to sometimes when you get a bit more mature or a bit older.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to understand that too.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of an early dinner, but also I think that's the entire of the UK are fans of eating early.
Yeah.
Because when I first met my wife, she's French, and earlier than a 9 p.m. dinner or 8:30 reservation was crazy to her, and all her friends as well. Whereas now, 4 years later, she's a big fan of a 6 p.m. dinner time.
Yeah, for sure. 9 p.m. for me is game over. It's
I'm wrapping down. I'm in bed soon.
Exactly.
But I don't think that is just a British thing. There's the science behind it. Again, I can't tell you what science is, but all the podcast, the information, they said 2 hours before you go to bed. Don't eat anymore. 1 hour before, don't drink anymore. Same with getting off screens. It's like, let your body do its thing before you go to bed. So for me, I'm a huge fan of an early dinner, early bedtime. But I'd imagine in the restaurant industry, that's not what you play into.
Well, I'm handling 5 restaurants now, soon a couple of more. And the reality is that, 2 years ago, I switched as an entrepreneur, chef entrepreneur that I am now. And I tell you, for me, I have my chef in each of my restaurant, which they report to me and we work together close, where we today I'm going to have a tasting of the game menu coming out. The Christmas menu is coming, so I'm going to have the tasting as well.
If you need an extra mouth, let me know.
Exactly.
I do love Christmas
So that's a hard day for me. So I'm going to have to try all those dishes. So I want to stay the designer and the architect of my kitchen, and that's very important. But it's true that I'm the one on the ground doing it? No more. And I think because of that, I have the luxury to actually get a little bit my freedom back, which is basically be at home a bit earlier. And honestly, I go quite early in bed as well because I like to wake up early. So for me, it's more my chef after reporting when I wake up in the morning and sit back. So that's why I can eat as well. Actually,
and when you're at home, are you the one cooking dinner as well?
No. So honestly, at home, first I barely eat dinner because I like to fast. And if I will dinner, I will do like you, very early. And I like to go like grilled vegetables, just grilled vegetables.
Wow.
And that's it, I love, I think veggie is a very interesting topic where, I love to make veggie great again. I think people underestimate vegetables a lot. And just come back from Japan where, we had the chance to visit the farm of tomato, strawberry. It's just amazing. And I think there's nothing better to have a good plate of vegetable. Where again, when I was younger, you will tell me that I will run away.
Yeah, maybe it's not a restaurant for teenagers.
Yes, exactly. But I think it's important to keep it in the. My son eats a lot of veggie, and actually, a lot of kids in Japan, you ask them, "Hey, what's your favorite ingredients?" They will answer you broccoli. They will answer you some vegetables.
I think so alien to us.
Exactly, it's alien to us, but I think it tells us maybe also that we need to input this in our education and on the daily basis. Because, of course, some vegetable, my son will spit it, he's 2 years old, but you try again, and to some point, there will be some, he will like it. My wife do a green smoothie in the morning. I hate it because she put like spinach, celery, and I just can't take it. But my son drinks it like crazy, and I'm like, wow, that's nuts for me, but I'm so happy,
Yeah, it's happy for his health.
Yeah, right? Exactly, happy for himself, yeah.
So that's very interesting insights. So I do want to talk about sort of the business side as well.
Please.
We've talked a lot about cooking, which is, I love asking finally a world-renowned chef about nutrition. It's great to hear. So you said you sort of were reborn 2 years ago on this new journey.
Yep.
And so now you're an entrepreneur, business owner, restaurant owner. How's that transition been in the last 2 years from being at the very top of an industry, something you're very confident with, 27 years of experience, to now being on this new journey as an entrepreneur?
I think it's been very humbling. It's almost like, when you are a football professional player and you're doing very well and everything you do, you're amazing, and then you become lousy again, it's almost a bit frustrating because, it's not that I'm lousy in business, but there's a lot of things that I didn't learn at school and that I didn't learn, period, And of course, when we have a perception of thinking that you can do business, but it's not given to everyone. And the things is for me, why this book strikes me 2 years ago is because I tell you how I feel when I read that book. I feel humiliated, I feel humbled, and I feel awake. And why that is because, so John C. Maxwell explained what's the 21 law to be a great leader. And for me, when I listen all of 21, I'm like, geez, I'm quite bad in any of what he's saying, like I don't have much room of actually being a good one, And what I also love what he say that, look, I'm only good at 2 or 3 rules finally. But why I'm successful is because I have people around me who actually have a different knowledge and which they're very good at it. And that's why I've been working with them for a long time. So for me, being a successful guy like him, saying that first of all, he trusts other people and that he's a full team, a full package who covers the 21 law by different, like expertise. I think it's something that as a chef, it's not easy to let go. Because, chef, it's a control freak who wants to hold everything. He wants to make sure that the quality of the food is there, the pastry, the bread, everything has to be on top notch. So let go is the most underrated like feeling as a chef. And for me, when I read this book, it because I told you I was a bit bored in the way that I feel like, okay, having all those praise is nice, but where do I go from there, right? And then when I read this book, I almost get slapped in the face where I'm like, okay, well, dude, you have a lot of work to do. You have to wake up. And if you want to go this path, I think you're going to the wrong path. You could be that person 100 years ago, but now you need to evolve as a new person that you want to be. And that's why for me, in terms of business, I will say was the best, I will say, awakening for me. And what it learns me along the way is that any entrepreneur at the beginning will actually fail or will do some mistake. I did tons of mistakes. When we opened Clarence, I did so many mistakes. But it's no mistake. It's called a learning curve. And it's part of a journey of an entrepreneur where, of course, you need to learn from that. It's only when you're on the ground that you finally realizing what you have to do. It's always an ongoing process that, you need to be humble by accepting that you was wrong and then figure out why and then moving on and striking to move to the next problem or to the next difficulty. And I think for me, I'm a competitive person and I love it because you need to, like you just say, right? When you're the top of the food chain as a chef, you're only getting praise and all of a sudden everything's not getting the way that you want. You're like, oh shit, I'm like a spoiled child, brat, which always gets his way, what he wants. And then you're like, okay, this one is not working, and this one is not working, and this one is not working. So I tell you, the transition was tough. I think I have a couple of gray hair who came from that. But I tell you, it's also so rewarding when you finally, strike back. And, when I opened Clowns, I did so many mistakes where I tell you, I was very close to the bankruptcy, But then I dig deeper. I dig, I understand a couple of mistakes I did, I adapt, I readjust.
What was one of the biggest mistakes you made with Clarence?
I think for me, I want to do too many things at the same time in terms of concept first. That's the first big mistake I did. And also, I think, I will say that when you open a restaurant, don't open a restaurant just like a chef because you think you're a good chef, you know how to run the kitchen. It's nothing about that anymore. It's about having all the data of what is the location you're picking, what is the efficiency of the space, what space and what efficiency you want, how many target you expect, like in terms of numbers of clients, of average. I mean, there's a lot of work to do before to set up a restaurant instead of just saying, hey, I like this place, I'm gonna do good food there. Because we're 2024 now. People want good food, but they want a great service. They want a great experience. They want everything. They want the whole package. I think for me, kitchen is just one aspect of the equation. And that's why for me, of course, you're coming sillily like me, a naive guy thinking, okay, I come from all those Michelin Stars restaurants. I'm going to open a restaurant and all is going to work anyway. Well, then you understand that the road is a bit tougher than that and it's a bit more rocky. And that you really have to adjust, put your ego down, and try to understand what didn't work well. I think I didn't surround myself with the right people as well, where, for example, there was coming too much from my world, from fine dining, and working for a hotel or big chains or big owners, where the P&L it's totally different than a regular P&L. I mean, that's another problem, because it's about you can do a lot of millions in terms of turnover. But if your benefits are not there, you're dead, That's it, pretty simple. And that's why I'm very proud to say we are alive for 3 years in Clarence. And with all the mistakes I did, we just signed 3 new years of lease.
Hey, congratulations.
For Clarence, I'm very happy with that. And I'm very happy to be with Henderson in this building because they support me. And it was a tough road, but I'm still learning and I love it.
Well, you mentioned a few things there. And one of them which struck me was, as an entrepreneur, you're not owed anything.
No.
Just because you have 27 Michelin stars doesn't mean you're going to be a successful business owner.
Zero.
As soon as you go on the other side of the equation where you're actually running the business, you realize, yes, that experience is helpful in the expertise in the industry, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a success.
Yeah.
You have to get things right and learn and drop the ego and take your lessons on the chin and make it work.
Yes.
You're not owed anything. No, and so it's scary for people out there who are entrepreneurs and running their own business. You're coming from someone who is at the top of your game, and it's still you're close to bankruptcy with Clarence.
And that's why for me, I tell you, I love Elon Musk, for example. It's a cliche because he's quite now very hyped and everything, but I mean, when he had with SpaceX, when he gets almost bankrupt, when he launched the third one and he make it for the fourth one, if he didn't get the sponsor from the NASA, he will be gone, for at least SpaceX, right? But what I love what he say, because I'm reading his book, and he say, you know what? Even if I will bankrupt SpaceX, I don't care because I will start again. And I think for me, that's another aspect of the game that you need to understand is that. Look, I was close to bankruptcy with Clarence, and I think we bounced back, and I'm very happy and proud with my team to have made it, and now we're doing very well, and I'm happy with that. But that's the reality of how it looks like. And 27, 50 stars, it doesn't matter. And French, actually, it's another aspect of chef that you don't see, but chef doesn't like to take risk, So, for example, when you work for a big hotel, a big corporation, it's always easy to play with the money of other people. But at the end of the day, do you really make money or do you don't, And I think for me, this is where the real game is there. Own your own first restaurant and see how long you're going to make it. And sometimes it's way shorter than you think, because if you didn't put together what you need to, then you're out, And I think for me, that's what I like in this game is that, it's not an easy one. You need to adapt. What was working 2 or 3 years ago is no more relevant today. And you need to keep evolving all the time. And that's very important.
We spoke to Jay Khan, who's the founder of Koa, recently.
Yeah.
And he says something very similar to what you're mentioning there, is that it's not just about the food or it's not just about the drinks. It's the whole experience. Correct. When they're doing world's best bar competition and Asia's best bar, they're not judging on just the flavor.
Yes.
It's the vibe, the staff, the service, the vibe and the music.
Yeah.
And so you've got so much to think about, which maybe I'm sure you do think about them as a chef as well.
Yeah.
But really, as a business owner, it's a completely different hat to when you're just in the kitchen, right?
Yeah. I think for me, guides are very important because, you need a recognition, you need Michelin, you need the 50 best, you need all those guys. But for me, honestly, all that I get, I will always have, I believe, a Michelin Stars restaurant in my ecosystem. I believe so, but I think I like to be connected to the wheel, and the wheel is your client every single day. And I think for me, sometimes there's a world which what guide wants and what the customer wants. And I think for me, I'm more focused right now on what my customer wants than actually only the guide. For example, I get so many stars. Clarence, we don't have star. I could easily have a star if I want to push for that. But is that what people want right now in Hong Kong? I don't think so. Because, the reality is that right now, people looking at money for value, people looking at flexibility, people looking for fun concepts where you have all this and above, and that's why for me it's important to also make sure that you're facing the real game, and not only the ego game where putting Michelin stars in Clarence will be amazing, and then what? For example, I think for me, I'm very happy to don't have a star in Clarence. I'm very happy to have them in L'Envol because it's two different separate business model and mindset. But I think sometimes for me, my most important focus right now is my customer, the data of my customer, the habits of what they have, and what I can do to bring more people in.
So if you wanted a Michelin star for Clarence, you would have to tailor make your menu, your experience, just to fit the criteria of Michelin star.
Well, I think that there's clearly like a criteria to get 1, 2, or 3 star, and I think there's a setup to do. And I think for me, frankly speaking, I believe that I want to show more with Clarence. Clarence is the first gate of showing that French food can be accessible. So if I start to put 1 Michelin stars, or I push to get 1 Michelin stars, which we could have one day, but for example, Yabird is a great example. Yabird has 1 Michelin stars. You can argue it deserves or doesn't. for me, I don't really care. But I think what I care, and I see with Matt, for example, at the Hubbard, is that he never changed his way of thinking, working, or doing business because of the star. So in this aspect, I'm fine with it. But of course, if you start to change your business model, if you
Just
start
to get the star.
exactly, if you start to change your business model, if you start to mold everything to make sure that you have your star, and let me remind you why people want star. You know, when the Michelin Star start very early, when you have a Michelin stars, it will give you a 30% increase of revenue. So the thing is, it can be a chicken egg issue, which is wrongly understood. You know, if I can tell you that if tomorrow I get the Michelin stars in clowns, I don't think I will do 30% more income. Okay, and that's why I think it's an old perception that you have. So now it become more about like ego or just like an award, which is beautiful award. But for example, for clowns, it's not what I want because it's not the positioning of. Again, they can give me a star tomorrow. Nothing I can do. I cannot control. They can do that. But my priority is not right now star for clowns or for my other concepts because it's not what's it's important for me right now.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I want to get my head around the actual structure of you as a business owner now.
Yes.
And you've got your restaurants kind of under you.
Correct.
You've got a head chef at each one of those restaurants.
Yes.
And then you hire them yourself and work with these chefs to make sure that everything's under control. So it's not necessarily you as the chef in these restaurants, but they're directed by you.
So I will say that I have two big acts that I'm working on as an entrepreneur. My consulting axe is quite strong now. I have 5 restaurants. So Saint Regis, I'm collaborating with Marriott for now over 6 years. I signed also same time as clients another 3 years contract, where basically I'm in charge of Saint Regis with L'Envol and with the hotel, where I'm helping them to run L'Envol to make sure that we're keeping our star and our standards. Then we have Clarence, which is actually my own restaurant. I have a restaurant in Hangzhou next to Shanghai, which is actually a small restaurant with about 15 seats where the owners want 1 Michelin stars. So this one, theoretically, it's not something which I do because I don't like to take Michelin stars restaurant overseas. I like to do more casual concept. But it was such a beautiful place with only 10, 15 seats that honestly, I believe that if we push hard, we can get 1 Michelin star there. And then I have Taipei W, where I opened season, and now I'm in charge of the whole hotel. And I have MGM Macau as well. So I will put this in the pot of my consultancy, which go very well. And I have a couple of new countries coming coming year, which I'm excited of. What I'm trying to do now in order of what I was telling you before is that I try to scale restaurant and concept for the future. L'Envol is not really scalable because it's a restaurant which is finally complicated to duplicate. I think Clarence and Season, which is a bit the same, even is different because Season is in Taipei, Clarence is in Hong Kong. I can scale 5, 6, 7 Clarence or Season, but it's not scalable like 50 or 100 shops. And what I'm working on as well on the other side is to creating like a franchise, a model of French food in Asia who could work.
Wow.
And that's another big project I'm working on. And this is for me, where I'm spending a lot of time now, because for me, I think going to all those we mentioned before, which is healthy food, more accessible to a formula which has more rentability as well, it's something I want to achieve. And that's
you sound like you've got your hands full.
Just a bit.
A lot of different restaurants.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think you're allowed to go to bed at 9 p.m, are you?
Yeah.
You're too busy. Too busy.
No, but for example, I always take this example. Look at Elon Musk. He do SpaceX, Boring
True,
Company, Tesla. He has the thing. How do you think he handles? So I can still stock a couple of restaurants and still handle it.
That's a good point.
Exactly.
If he's your reference point, then
for sure.
You can always do more. So in Hong Kong, then, what's the F&B scene like in Hong Kong?
I think that, I don't like to BS, so I go straight to the point. I think we've been slapped very hard after COVID. I think it was a weak and rude awakening where, a lot of people mislead about COVID, where it was definitely not the best time humanly wise, for sure, for everyone. But in terms of F&B, I can tell you that any single restaurant was booming. I had a month of waiting list in Clarence, 2 months in L'Envol. We was doing numbers that we will most probably never
Before
do.
COVID?
No, during COVID. During COVID.
Wow.
And the reason why is very simple. You keep Hong Kong people in Hong Kong and you tell them, look, you have 3 things to do. Or you go to the restaurant and, you go to a restaurant, or you go to staycation, or you buy wine and you drink at home. So all the spending power that they have was shifted to 3 three focus, which was drinking good wine, having a nice meal, and having a nice staycation. So of course, we've been beneficiary of that. So that's why many people are saying, COVID was tough and everything. No, COVID was the best time for Hong Kong. What was very tough is when in April, all the regulations are gone, no more quarantine. What happened is Hong Kong from one day to another become like, okay, now people were spending crazy money because they was focusing on this, that everyone was traveling about, So, I remember in L'Envol, I had one of my friend who was a banker. He's doing very well. He booked a private room in L'Envol. And I remember a week before the booking, he said, look, Olivier, can you cancel the booking, please? I said, yeah, sure. I say, no problem. I say, well, we decided actually for the same price to go to Bangkok with my friends. And it pays everything. And, and I was like, well, Olivier, I think you have to wake up, we have to redo the price. We have to rethink about our offer. And it was not really mean, he really said naturally because he's a very natural guy, right? And actually I realized that, well, we have to wake up, And the difficulty of Hong Kong, which is, as you know, it's complicated, is the real estate is very expensive, the manpower is very expensive, and the glutes are very expensive. So if you take the shaker of Hong Kong, it's tough. That's why you have 1.2, 1.5 million people going to Shenzhen from Hong Kong who go and eat there. And I think for me, we are now to a transformation of Hong Kong F&B scene where a lot of restaurants who are having the old model and the old formula are dying. And that's why a lot of restaurants close. Look at Seva, for example. Seva was the first restaurant that I go 15, 16 years ago when I started. It was packed. It was one of the beautiful, most rooftop. They are gone, and a lot of other ones are gone as well, And the reason why is because if you have too heavy burden in terms of real estate, rent plus staff, and your shaker is not quickly adapted, you die. And I think now, when before in Hong Kong, whatever you will open, if you have a good concept with food and service and ambience, it will be working. You better think about twice before to open. Make sure that you strike at the right place at the right moment with the right concept, because otherwise you're gone. And I think for me, this is why Hong Kong now is a bit tough. In F&B is quite tough because people, having a lot of choice. They can also travel very easily, and that's why we need to make Hong Kong competitive again, and that's not easy, but we're working on.
It's true. I didn't think about that during COVID, that restaurants would actually be doing well.
Yes.
But it's true then as soon as the restrictions got lifted, everyone just traveled. And yes. You can't blame them, right?
No,
because
exactly.
We'd been locked up for 2 years.
Correct.
And so now if you were to open if someone was to open a new restaurant, not you, with your experience and everything, if someone was wanting to open up a restaurant in Hong Kong tomorrow, what is the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I think I want to widen the scope. I think it's not only about Hong Kong. Okay. I think one thing I want to be clear is, I love Hong Kong. Hong Kong is my home, And I think, a lot of people say, Bangkok is booming, Singapore is booming. I can tell you, all Asia has, difficulty. It's not only Asia, it's everywhere. That's why I think I want to make clear that, it's tough in Hong Kong, but it's tough everywhere. Taipei is not easy, Bangkok is not easy, Singapore is not easy. And we know that, we hear so many people saying, Singapore does so well compared to Hong Kong. Well, Singapore facing the same problem, I think for me, what we need to do is clearly more mature concepts with clear concepts in terms of direction, but also financial and financial planning. And I think the efficiency side, I'm impressed, and one of my model is Japan. Japan is outstanding. Japan has an economy which was tough for many years. Those chefs and those F&B people put together a concept where they had very skinny budgets, but the way that they deliver the concept is still outstanding. Sometimes you have some restaurants which are way smaller, but you have 1 or 2 or 3 staff. But then when you go there, you have people queuing for 1 hour to go there, and it's still outstanding. So this show, for me, that's where I inspire myself of saying, look, you need to learn for those people because they have skinny budgets. They do honestly very, very nice concepts, but still having great return because they thought about everything before. And I think that's for me what I will offer as a solution is to make sure that size-wise, staff-wise, concept-wise, you are very strong, and then you launch it, and then I think it's fair.
Try and stay lean.
Quite linear, yes.
Which makes sense for any business,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
So as you know, the name of the podcast is Abnormal.
Yes.
It's for normal people who want to do abnormal things of that you are doing and have done for 25 years. If you had to give one piece of advice to any one of our listeners who's looking to do something abnormal in their lives, not necessarily become a chef, what would that be?
I think for me, like, I always think about my kids, and I think what is the advice I will tell to my kids is, I think a lot of people saying it, but I think is to don't be scared to fail. I think failing is a misconcept where a lot of people thinking failing is horrible. You be careful to don't fail. But I almost fell with clowns, for example, and now I bounce back. And I think the process of almost failing or when you fail, some entrepreneur you never talk about it because they fell. But I think for me, you need to learn about your failure and try to kind of analyze its why. And just going back to Elon, when he said that the 3 failures when he launched SpaceX 3 times, right? For him, there was none of them was failure actually. There was understanding of why it didn't work, which gives him the edge to make it happen on the 4th time. And I think for me, that's for me what you be gutsy, be driven, and don't be afraid to fail, because you can always bounce back. And I think that's something I like, especially in Hong Kong. And I think it's the advice I will give.
Great advice. That's normally the last question I ask guests, but I don't want to miss this opportunity to ask you some more fun ones as a chef. Okay, so this is like a drinking game question.
Yes.
If you could only eat one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be? Or one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I always say, I joke with my wife, I say, if I will have my last meal to do with you and I will die after, I think I will pick sushi sashimi to a top-notch level, because I start sushi sashimi only when I came to Hong Kong. And I think the happiness of having a master sushi, doing a sushi sashimi to the next level is just...
but there's a difference, because then that's your last meal.
Quite,
but to eat something for every meal for the rest of your time on Earth.
I think it's a tough one, but if can I choose one type of kitchen?
No, that's the next one. Your favorite. Okay, let's do it. If you had to eat one cuisine, one type of cuisine.
I think I would pick Chinese because there's a lot of variety inside Chinese.
That's it's good. So not French.
No, not French.
Why?
I think I love French food, but I think I love travel and I love flavors and I love variety. I think I become, my wife always say you become 30% Asian or Chinese, so I guess it's from there.
and it's a great cuisine, right?
Yeah.
Not British.
Well, not British, yes.
Why are you laughing?
Yeah, exactly. I think about mint jelly right away. You see British, the mint jelly.
Baked beans, jelly.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I have some good English friends, and honestly, as I told you, one of my favorite chefs is Marco Pierre-White, because I think he's an amazing chef. I study him a lot, and I think he shows that English chefs can bring it to the next level. The Laborie, Brett, who is in London now, just got 3 Michelin Stars 2 years ago. I'm so happy for him. He's an amazing chef. There's a lot of good places in London, in England. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. I hope my wife listens to this.
Must be my German side, maybe.
And finally, what's the most unusual ingredient you've ever cooked with?
So ingredients, that's a tough one because I have quite a lot, but I had quite a lot. Unusual ingredients.
As you are an extension of Mother Nature.
I think, I will tell you one of my favorites that I think can be unusual because it's so, they have so much depth in it that I love citrus, the citrus family. And I think for me, I use a lot in my kitchen because, French, we're using a lot of cream and butter. And I chose a long time ago to use more spices and citruses. And I think for me, why I talk about citruses, because you have so many elements. You have lime and lemon that everyone knows. But then you have calamansi, you have yuzu, sudachi, so many others. And I think for me, they are, the hands of Buddha. It's such a very unusual lemon that is amazing. And the depth of citrus family is so interesting that you still have so much to learn. And the fragrance that it gives you is just nuts. So I love it. Yeah,
that's a very chef's answer.
Yes,
I'm sure if you line them all up to me, I'd be like, lemon, lime.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Olivier, thank you so much for your time, for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's great to meet you. Great to pick your brains. Thank you for answering my silly questions.
Thank you very much.
And I'm very, very excited to hopefully visit your restaurants again and also see what you've got coming up in the future.
Please let me know when you come to my restaurant. I'll make sure I feed you with some
make
good
sure
food.
it's good. Make sure.
Exactly.
I don't need to let you know to make sure it's good. But thank you again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Cheers.
Pleasure.
Merci. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Abnormal Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to on right now, as it really goes a long way to growing the show. Thank you and see you in the next one.